Risk of Rain 2 is the most forgiving yet challenging roguelike that I have ever played. But hold on. How can a game be both challenging in terms of its difficulty yet feel like it's forgiving? Usually when a game is described as challenging, it means that there's very little room for error and several obstacles in the way of the player's success. Yet when the word forgiving is brought up, it's taken to say that the player is given several chances at succeeding in the way of giving them plenty of room for error. I suppose the best words then to correctly describe my feelings would be well-rounded, in the way the games like Celeste feel well-rounded, where everything present in the game has been thought out to its full capacity to deliver on a very intentional yet user-friendly playstyle. If you want to take alternate routes and complete the climb in Celeste in alternate fashion to your peers, you are free to do so. In the same way, if you want to get to the end of a run in Risk of Rain 2 and defeat the final boss, there are several strategies and item builds and playstyles that you are free to experiment with. And if I'm to compare this game to another roguelike like Slay the Spire, builds in Slay the Spire felt too linear or dependent on RNG, while Risk of Rain 2 says that any item you can get in game can contribute to a healthy run one way or another. I wouldn't say that all the items are on the equal level with each other, and that there are some characters that benefit more from different items than others, but even if I'm picking up the worst item in Risk of Rain, I don't ever feel like my run has ended on that one item. It simply means that when I do get the items that I desire, it makes me feel more powerful and makes defeating the waves of enemies just a little easier than before. So what is Risk of Rain 2? I've already dropped the name of the genre that it falls into, but how does it go about fulfilling the roguelike style? How does it differ from other games in the genre? And above all else, is it fun? Before we continue, I'm probably just going to keep calling this game just Risk of Rain, because adding the 2 sounds far too formal for me, and in the event that you get confused as to which game I'm discussing, I suggest you look at the title of this video. Let's talk about Risk of Rain's game design, because it's what sticks out to the average player. In an age where roguelikes are mostly 2D or isometric in their views, Risk of Rain did a triple backflip and said, hey, I'm a 3-dimensional, third-person shooter, and while I didn't know the game at first, I thought it was pretty cool that it could do a triple backflip. It had my attention. Despite being given the full view of the land and being able to work in a 3D space, Risk of Rain has this feeling of panic as you constantly check over your shoulder to see if any monsters have spawned. You may be able to see that Lemurian chilling down there, but what about behind you, above you? What's tunneling through the earth beneath your feet? The space that Risk of Rain sets itself in is used to its maximum potential and leaves everything reasonably within reach. Like, sure, the top of the platform is just over there, but you're going to have to walk there first, and never mind the enemies that are spawning in on you. True to the roguelike style, you can gain upgrades for your characters, and in order to do so, you have to shoot or slice or beat the absolute living crap out of near about anything that moves so that you can fund Overwatch loot boxes that give you a variety of items with varying rarity and consequently varying strength. Gray items are common and aren't too powerful on their own, green items are rarer and you're guaranteed 1 per boss fight, and red items are the holy grail of all items, except for the jumpy bracelets. You jumpy bracelets. Okay, so Risk of Rain can do a triple backflip, but is it cool? Like, are they just showing off for the sake of attention, or is there a personality to back that up? Well, I've spent enough time with it now that I can safely say, yes. Yes, it does. What keeps me most interested in the game is the way that items are handled. Sure, there's a tier for rarity, but I've never felt bad about picking up an item or that a run was over because I didn't get X item. There is, however, at least 1 bad item per tier, and well, they're pretty easy to spot because they teach bad messages to children. The gray tier has shrooms, which shrooms are drugs. Don't do drugs, kids. And it also has healing slug, which is a lie made up by Hopoo Games. Like, slugs don't heal, they destroy my mom's vegetable garden. Green tier has the squid turret, which slowly kills itself, and suicide is a bad message. The red tier has jumpy bracelets, which, fuck you jumpy bracelets. You tricked me into thinking I was getting an actually good red item, which makes you a liar. And lying is bad. But do you know what is a good message? Well, telling people that the majority of people don't watch my videos. It's true. Nearly 2,000 people are subscribed to this channel, but only 50 of them cared to watch my last review. That's, it's not a burn or a flex, I'm just depressed. So what about the rest of the items? Well, Risk of Rain has an interesting mechanic that out of the roguelikes that I've played so far, I haven't seen yet. They make it so that your duplicate items that you can pick up have their effects stack. That way an item that's dubbed as common can even feel useful so long as you're able to grab a few of them, which is relatively easy. Crowbars, which is a tool, and tools are good. They cause you to do 150% of your attack damage to enemies that are above 90% health. Each crowbar that you add increases that 150% by another 50%, so with 4 crowbars you deal 300% damage, which, that's pretty good. Then there's the syringe, which boosts your attack speed, and syringes are good because they're just vaccines, and it's been scientifically proven that vaccines make you move faster. By far the best white tier item is the tri-tip dagger, which causes your enemy to bleed, and well, blood is good for hydration because you know what they say, if you ever get dehydrated, just run on down to the blood bank and grab yourself a bag. If anyone comes up to you and says, "Hey, that's disgusting," you can stop, hold up your human-sponsored Capri Sun and say, "Hey, well, can you stop being so negative?" This script has gone off the deep end, hasn't it? Most of the green tier items are useful, save for the squid turd and situational ones like the Lipton Daisy, which only activates when you're fighting the stage boss. Will-o-the-wisp and the missile are probably my 2 favorite green drops, since AoE damage is probably the most broken thing in this game, and the extra burst damage from the missile is pretty handy. There's also these 3D printer things that are littered around different levels, and the idea is that you toss a random item of the same rarity into one of these and you get the displayed item in return. This is the main way that you can get crazy high stacks of items, turning those singular crap gray tier items into a formidable pile of one item. The goal of the game is shoot monster, find the horny platform, it's the Everton Discord, press E on the platform, beat the boss, move to the next level, and repeat. It's a very, very simple gameplay loop, and it's what roguelikes are entirely based on. Risk of Rain 2 does this seamlessly, though what I like about it is that you can advance at your own pace. If you find the teleporter early in the round, there's nothing stopping you from hitting it right off the bat. It is advised that you try and pick up some items first so that you can, what's the phrase? Oh yeah, deal damage. Alternatively, you can stay on that first level for as long as you'd like, with the only real pressure being that the difficulty meter rises over time and you'll eventually run out of items to find on that stage to amplify your damage against gradually tougher enemies. Do you see what I mean though? The game is challenging in the way that it pushes you to move forward with the difficulty that gradually increases until it becomes a straight up bullet hell simulator. Yet it's forgiving in the way that allows you to experiment with the space and items that are freely given to you. While some loops and levels remain very much the same, your level of interaction with them changes with each run, with randomly placed teleporter pads, random spawn locations, and above all else, different ways to stack items. The game design itself is so airtight that, beyond a few minor criticisms that I have of the items present in the game, I can't really argue with it. Risk of Rain knows its roguelike basics and expands on them in a very professional manner. But for the love of all things Hoppu, make jumpy bracelets a green item so that I don't get disappointed again. I've been thinking for a while now as to what sets a roguelike apart. Well, besides all that, what keeps me most interested in roguelikes are the weapon loadouts offered to the player and ways that the game orients itself around said weapons. The qualities of roguelikes are carried on the backs of well-designed, efficient, and satisfying combat systems, and without them, there's no challenge. In fact, there's not even a game to begin with. We know that we have a weapon that we have to use, but why does our character have the weapon? Who are we using that weapon against? Twitter? Nah, said the devs. Twitter's skull is too thick. Not even a laser drill can make a dent in that. Risk of Rain has a variety of mostly faceless characters who differ greatly from each other. There's Akimbo Perk Call of Duty who shoots guns, then there's Hanzo from Overwatch, there's Genji from Overwatch, there's Doomfist from Overwatch, and that's not even going as far as to mention Pixar's Wall-E, who brings back his signature move from the movie, shooting chunks of rebar at you at terminal velocity. That movie was released in 2008. I'm getting old. The sheer diversity in playstyles between the characters available makes each run vastly different because each character synergizes differently with the items that you can pick up, which, as I established before, can be put into any combination that you please since there really is no bad option. Even the bad items that I listed before have at least one character that does well with them. Yes, even the shrooms have their place. With the engineer, since his turret boys copy the items that he picks up and the turrets are stationary. But the engineer, he's also a drug addict, so don't take advice from him. What this means is that if you have a run that you felt could have gone better or are getting bored with one character, you're at the liberty to switch. Well, sort of. There's a progression system that Risk of Rain has in play, and it's the closest to being a light that this game can be perceived as. You start the game with just Akimbo from Call of Duty, but can unlock the rest of the roster in a variety of ways, which makes each of them feel novel and like you've earned them properly. Not all of the characters are great, per se, but there's something about knowing that the time that I spent trying to unlock them feels justified in some way. The reward for playing the game is being able to eventually play the game in more ways. I know, it's vague once again, but I'll come back to this point later. Now, what about the enemies that you face? Well, they're from a nature documentary from your nightmares. To start, you have lizards that breathe fire, beetles the size of dining tables, kamikaze jellyfish, a walking Zen garden that shoots laser beams, and the floating fiery heads of judgment. All of which are familiar enough for us to understand what they're all about, but designed in such a way that the game feels alien, for lack of a better word. These creatures all fit into the game's design cleverly so that killing them is satisfying, but most importantly in a way that is uniquely Risk of Rain. Like, yeah, you're supposed to beat enemies. That's what you do in any roguelike nowadays. But the enemies present here have always had this nagging sensation like they didn't belong. I didn't either, since with most characters you dropped out of the sky in an escape pod, but the fact that the monsters themselves can feel so alien that they're at a disconnect with the world around them compounds that feeling and makes them stand out even more. The only aliens that I felt really belonged anywhere are the lunar devices that you encounter on the last stage, because they, like their surroundings, are a shade of gray with blue accents. Conversely, some of the other maps are green and lush, dark and gloomy, vibrant red and explosive, yet Lemurians remain purple, the Rock Boys remain stacks of formidable dark rock, etc. They are not grounded to any one location. Then, there's elite monsters. Elite monsters are what truly make this game's combat interesting. Like, sure, you can get hit by a regular Lemurian attack and shrug off the damage, but what about a Lemurian that burns you on hit so that you lose more HP over time? Or what about a beetle that explodes and freezes you in place on death? Not only do these enemies hit harder with more dynamic attacks in a way that diversifies the kinds of enemies you go against, but they also mean to pose a greater threat to the player in general. This, combined with the ever-rising difficulty meter that I mentioned before, is a brutal reminder to the player that they need to keep moving under threat of death. And I know I haven't said anything funny in a minute or two, and that's because I'm so in awe with every aspect of this game's design that I can't bring myself to mock it. It deserves more attention than I believe a lot of people have given credit for. And if I haven't managed to convince you yet on this game's mechanics and enemies and characters though, may I suggest a slightly more artistic perspective. Christodoulou
Hello everybody, this is Chris Christodoulou.
Is the composer for the soundtrack for both Risk of Rain games. I listened to the full commentary video that he has up on YouTube where he explains his process of music, and it's a fairly interesting podcast to listen to if you have 2 hours to spare. What strikes me best about this soundtrack is that it kind of has everything. Do you want an intense metal soundtrack to pump you up? Throw on You're Gonna Need a Bigger Ukulele. Do you need something to introduce you to the album properly? The main theme, Risk of Rain 2, is a pretty solid option. Do you want pizza for dinner? I mean, Risk of Rain's soundtrack can't do that, but I'm sure there's a place near you that delivers. And while you're waiting for your order to come in, why not listen to A Glacier Eventually Farts and Don't You Listen to the Song of Life? I'm not joking. That's the actual name of a song. Risk of Rain's soundtrack has found a way to perfectly encapsulate its quieter moments by sending you afloat on chill progressions like those found in The Rain, formerly known as Purple. It does an even better job at emphasizing that first step onto the planet with evapotranspiration. The composer also has a greater sense of humor than I do, as you can probably tell with the titles that I've listed off so far. There's even a song that plays when you enter the alternate moon zone that's called Parjanya, which is apparently an Indian god of rain. I've got nothing else to add there, that's just clever. The weird chord progressions in Locrian mode, the unusual time signatures, these are intentional composing choices made to point out that you are on an alien planet. Nothing is right. Yet things are familiar like something from a dream. That's just some straight up Wizard of Oz shit right there. Being in a three-dimensional space already lends itself to its own visual, well, not exactly problems, but the styles that you have in 3 dimensions vastly differ from what other games in the genre have done already, With 2D indie games, you mostly see 16-bit art, like the first Risk of Rain game did previously, or some kind of hand-drawn style like we see in Darkest Dungeon. Working a flat palette onto a three-dimensional space isn't exactly easy. I mean, yeah, real observant Kai, 2D is not the same as 3D, critic of the year. Next thing you know, I'll be telling you guys that the grass is green or something. Or maybe it is easier, I don't know. But what I do know is that not only does Risk of Rain's visual style set itself apart from a lot of other roguelikes, I mean heck, a lot of indie titles in general, but it looks like a lot of care was put into it as well. The design isn't low poly, but it holds enough of its own cartoonish charm to make it definitively sci-fi versus a more realistic approach. Just like its soundtrack, the visuals are uniquely Risk of Rain. And what I appreciate about the art style is how easy it is to understand visually. Later levels may have me eating my words because they're usually an epileptic mess of explosions and numbers and visual flares, but when it comes to introduction, you couldn't have done it more cleanly than this. You can tell that that enemy is bleeding because of the red damage numbers, the blood coming from their body, and the indicator above their health bar. This plays into the familiarity that I mentioned before with the enemies, yet this time it's mountains of brown rock, swamps of murky water, and fields of green grass. Once again, you're heavily reminded that these things are things that you know, but they're in a setting that's alien for you, the player. Risk of Rain 2 is a unique game in the way that you get as much out of it as you're willing to put into it. The core gameplay is linear, as it is with any roguelike, but there are pieces of each map that stand out as different and invite the player to explore them. There's hidden rooms, these little blue things that you can spend cryptocurrency on, and they send you to Brazil, the moon, a platform that activates a hidden trial, the void fields, all the way down to a hidden boss level that's arguably even more difficult than the main endgame boss himself. And that's the freedom of choice that Risk of Rain 2 presents to the player. You're not locked into doing the same linear thing over and over again. There's grace in allowing you to experiment with different items, hidden pieces of lore, and entirely different levels to discover. There's also 3 other tiers of items that I didn't discuss earlier, mostly because I felt that they fit better into the themes here. You have orange items, which are referred to as equipment. They're a single use ability with powerful effects, and they're not limited to your character selection. Every character has their own unique set of abilities, but any character can pick up the same kind of equipment. You have blue items, which are lunar items that you can unlock with cryptocurrency, or lunar coins as they're being called. Probably to hide their true nature from the governing bodies, but hey, I won't judge. Tax evasion is a YouTuber's middle name after all. These items double down on the high risk, high reward aspect of the game the most, where they grant you powerful effects, but they also come with their own set of unique drawbacks. For instance, one such item halves your health, but doubles your damage. And finally, there's gold items. These are powerful items dropped by bosses that are really up there in terms of power with the red items most of the time. Nothing too special, but it makes fighting each boss a little more interesting in the way that you might just get that boss's special item at the end of the teleporter event. Risk of Rain 2 is the most complete roguelike experience that I've played to date, and while it's probably already done its rounds on YouTube and Twitch by now, I think that more players need to be aware of this game now that it's been fully released. 2020 has been the year of roguelikes, with Hades' full release being just a month after Risk of Rain's, and this fantastic game deserves all of the attention we can give it. If it seems like I've been vague with some of my descriptions, it's not because I don't know some things, it's because I want the new players to figure things out, since just like a lot of other top tier games with mysterious premises, it's best to go into this experience mostly blind. And that's all I have to say about this one. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe because I release content like this when I can, and check out my other social medias, which are here and here. Alright, safe travels everyone, and goodbye.